Hello, I'm Tom Hathaway. I'm wearing my BA hat, so let's talk business analysis. In this nugget, I'm going to introduce an agile approach to identifying stakeholders early in the project. We're going to talk about when to recognize when you're done identifying stakeholders. These techniques will help you when you are the one wearing the BA. Imagine planning a, quote, surprise, end quote, wedding without proposing to your bride-to-be. Imagine starting a project to remodel your house without consulting with your spouse. Imagine adding an additional floor to your house without consulting the local zoning authorities. These three are but a few of the wonderful hypothetical scenarios that describe the real-life situation in which some organizations initiate information technology or IT projects without including all relevant stakeholders. Involving the right decision makers is one of the critical success factors for any project, IT or otherwise. To involve them, you have to first figure out who they are. Stakeholder identification is one of the most important steps in the early phases of any project. Missing a single stakeholder might endanger the entire project. At the very least, discovering missed stakeholders late in the project is a major contributing factor to scope creep. How can you avoid this pitfall? The best and most obvious place to start is with the project sponsor, aka the person with the idea. The first stakeholder on any project is that sponsor, who, in a perfect world, is also the individual who has A. the funding necessary to pay for the project, B. the savvy to know what the project will ultimately deliver, and C. the political clout needed to get the project staffed, i.e., getting you assigned to define the solution. The project sponsor is the perfect first candidate to help you identify additional stakeholders, provided you ask the right questions. Early in the project, the sponsor's idea is usually vague. It's more of a vision of what the solution should be, as opposed to a detailed description of the outcome, let alone a specific step-by-step set of instructions for building the thing. That's fine. That is the sponsor's role. Ergo, we say that he or she, quote, envisions, end quote, the solution. Your challenge then is to figure out how to identify who all of the stakeholders might be based on this vague vision. Where to start? A good starting point is a plain, old, simple org chart. Remember those? They used to tell you who are responsible for what within your organization. Unfortunately, they are notoriously susceptible to getting out of date. As a result, organizations seldom maintain them. The good news is that they're very easy to create. So if your organization does not have one that's current, whip out your trusty org chart tool, i.e. a flip chart, whiteboard, or any drawing software you might prefer, and throw one together. This is Agile analysis at its best. Once you have a reasonable facsimile of a current org chart, chat with your project sponsor and perhaps your manager and peers about whom on the org chart the project will affect. For starters, simply note on the chart which departments or units are, quote, involved parties, end quote. Later, you'll have to decide whom in that unit you should interview to identify their needs and wants relative to your project. One group you might identify is a potentially large pool of participants who will be involved in creating the solution. Call this group of folks creators. This group might involve analysts, i.e. yourself, designers, developers, testers, aka software quality guardians, managers, network administrators, system administrators, database folks, and a whole slew of like-titled people who have a stake in your project. Ultimately, each of them might have a set of requirements that they would like to ensure that you follow. The next group that you should identify, arguably the most important group, we call end users. The general idea behind developing a solution is that at some point in the, we hope not too distant future, whatever your project delivers will be used by real people in the real world to do real things. Two potential pools of people you need to consider are the internal end users and the external end users. Internal end users are people within your organization, or at least within the project sponsor's sphere of influence. These are generally easier to get to than their external counterparts are. External end users could be Joe Blow in the Dixie Cups or anyone else on the planet, especially if you're developing software for the Internet, and they can be exceedingly difficult to identify and more difficult to satisfy. For instance, if your project delivers a web app, you may have a thundering herd of external end users who will use your app in the future. Internal end users are your primary source for stakeholder requirements. It's the responsibility of the internal end users to represent the external end users' interests in the requirements discovery process. Since these are the people who will use the solution once it's developed, their responsibility, believe it or not, is to tell you before they have access to your solution what they want the thing to do, how they want it to look, what they need to know from it, and how they would prefer to interact with it. By now, you might recognize that there are many folks interested in your project. You might consider starting a list of who all, that's the southern form of who, similar to their you all, you need to involve to get a good idea of what the project should deliver. You could even call this your, quote, stakeholder list, end quote. No sooner do you start to chat with the end users than you stumble across yet another group of folks who have something to say about what they want your solution to do. And that is the group we call SIGs, or Special Interest Groups. These might be methodology folks, a PMO or project management office, the legal department, auditors, or any number of different areas within your organization that have jurisdiction over something that will have to change for the solution you are defining to work. The SIG's responsibility is to place limits based on their specific interests on what you can and cannot do, or more importantly, what your solution can and cannot do. These limits are constraining requirements that you need to discover before you can consider your requirements discovery activities complete. Okay, this is now sufficiently complicated that it deserves a recap. Starting with your project sponsor and trusty org chart that you just whipped up, you've identified creators, internal and external end users, and SIGs. You've added all of them to your stakeholder list. Put that way, it sounds overly simple. The challenge is how to know that you've identified all of the relevant folks within each group. Unfortunately, there is no magic bullet to solve this challenge. One of the best ideas I can suggest is to share your stakeholder list with everyone on your stakeholder list and ask each one 3 final questions. Can you think of anyone not on this list that this project will affect? Anyone that can make a decision about the solution we create, or anyone that cares how the project is executed? If no one can add to your stakeholder list, your list is about as good as it's going to get. Oh, and one final thought. Do not make the mistake of chiseling your stakeholder list onto a stone tablet. A major component of managing change throughout the project is recognizing when changes in requirements changes who your project affects or who can affect your project.